Hey everyone, Hey everyone, I'm TM Sparrow, writer and homeschooling mom, and today I'm going to tell you all about the hero's journey. This video marks my 1-year anniversary on YouTube, and while I didn't plan to cover what is arguably the most well-known story structure in existence for my YouTube anniversary, I do think it's pretty cool that it worked out that way. The hero's journey is a pretty heavy structure. The original structure was put forward by Joseph Campbell in his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. Campbell was a mythologist and a professor who traveled a lot and read a lot and studied a variety of different cultures and myths and stories. In his reading and studying, Campbell came across a pattern that he claims exists in every story. And this pattern, so he claims, is based on psychology and the journeys of our own lives. And many students of Campbell's work do seem to truly believe that the hero's journey does reflect our own lives. Anyway, Campbell called this pattern or structure the monomyth. Later, Chris Vogler, a student of Campbell's work and a story analyst at Disney, condensed this monomyth into a 7-page memo and called it the hero's journey. Eventually, he expanded on that memo in his book, The Writer's Journey. Now, he condensed this monomyth, which originally had 17 points, into a structure of only 12 points. It's vulgar structure that I'm going to be discussing here today because I think that it's a little more streamlined and appropriate for modern audiences. But Campbell's work is still worth studying, and without the monomyth, we very likely wouldn't have the hero's journey at all, which I think would be a real shame because it's actually a really great structure. I think it's also worth mentioning that without the monomyth, we also wouldn't have the Star Wars that we know and love today. George Lucas freely admits that he based the story of Star Wars around the monomyth because he wanted to tell a story with a mythological feel. I'm going to present the structure as Vogler laid it out, but I want to note that many of these points don't have to happen in this specific order. This is a pretty flexible structure, and one that many people can relate to because it does reflect our own experiences. Okay, now that the history's out of the way, let's break down the steps of the hero's journey. Act 1. Departure. The first act of the hero's journey is where we see our heroes set off on their quest, whatever that quest may be. While this act has the most points, structurally, it typically only makes up about a quarter of the story, so it's a pretty fast-paced introduction to the hero's normal world and move into the special world. The 5 points in Act 1 of the hero's journey are the ordinary world, the call to adventure, refusal of the call, meeting with the mentor, and crossing the threshold. So let's talk about what each of the stops on our journey entails. 1. The ordinary world. This is exactly what it sounds like. In the beginning of the story, we see our hero in their normal life. This gives us something to compare to the special world that we will eventually see our hero enter. I'm going to use Star Wars as an example for this video because it's the most well-known and clear-cut hero's journey that I can think of, which is why it's so commonly used in discussions about this structure. Anyway, in A New Hope, we see the ordinary world at the very beginning. Luke winds his way through his day on the moisture farm with his aunt and uncle. His life is boring and routine, and he longs for adventure and excitement, which his uncle rejects. 2. The call to adventure. In the next phase of the journey, our hero will be presented with some kind of challenge or an adventure. Once they receive this call, they will no longer be able to stay in the stasis of their ordinary world. This is the part of the story that establishes the hero's goal and the stakes of the adventure. In Star Wars, the call to adventure comes from Obi-Wan Kenobi after R2-D2 escapes to attempt to deliver a message to him from Princess Leia. Luke, not wanting to get in trouble, goes after the droid, and after their initial meeting, Obi-Wan tells Luke that his father was a Jedi, and he offers to train Luke and take him on this adventure to save the princess and defeat the evil Empire. 3. Refusal of the call. So now our hero has this offer of an adventure in front of them, but with this call comes a fear of the unknown, which causes the hero to initially say no to the adventure. But it's not always this internal fear that prevents the hero from accepting their quest. Sometimes there is an external force at play that prevents the hero from being able to go on this great adventure. Either way, our hero requires something more to push them into crossing that threshold of adventure, whether it's encouragement from a mentor or some kind of further offense against the natural order of their life or world. I'm going to give you examples of both of these kinds of refusals. Continuing with Star Wars, we have a great example of an internal refusal. Luke initially rejects Obi-Wan's offer. Yes, he hates the Empire, but he couldn't possibly abandon his duties on the farm and leave his aunt and uncle behind. Harry Potter, however, is a perfect example of a refusal coming from external sources. It isn't Harry who rejects the call to attend Hogwarts. It's his aunt and uncle who prevent him from accepting, going to extreme lengths to keep him from even knowing that that call is there. 4. Meeting with the mentor. This is one of the most flexible parts of the hero's journey, as it doesn't have to fit neatly into a linear progression of the story. In fact, some stories don't even have a clear-cut mentor character, but that's getting into the archetypes of the hero's journey, and that is a topic for a whole other video. Anyway, the mentor is a character who advises the hero in the beginning of their journey, giving them the knowledge or tools that they need to navigate the special world. The most perfect example of a mentor character is Merlin from the Arthurian legends. There are also characters like Hagrid and Dumbledore in Harry Potter, Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings, and Fizban in the Dragonlance Chronicles. In Star Wars, of course, the mentor is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the meeting with the mentor moment occurs when Obi-Wan tells Luke about the Jedi and gives him his father's lightsaber. 5. Crossing the threshold. At the end of the first act, the hero finally commits to the journey by passing through some sort of a physical barrier into the special world. Harry Potter uses this in a literal sense by having Harry pass through a physical barrier to get to platform 9 3/4 to initiate his journey to Hogwarts. In Star Wars, Luke only commits to the journey after his aunt and uncle are killed by the Empire. There are two moments that I think could be viewed as Luke's crossing the threshold moment. The first is when he and Obi-Wan pass through the Stormtroopers checkpoint to get into Mos Eisley. But in particular, I think that the moment that he enters the cantina is his true crossing of the threshold. Because this is when we see just how different and, well, alien this world is to our farm boy. Act 2. Initiation. The second act marks the true beginning of the hero's adventure. They have entered the special world, and now the story really takes off. This act makes up the bulk of the story, usually around half, despite having one less part of the structure than the first act. The 4 parts of Act 1 are tests, enemies, and allies, approaching the inmost cave, the ordeal, and the reward, or seizing the sword. So let's break it down. 6. Tests, enemies, and allies. Now that the hero has entered the special world, they begin to make both friends and enemies, and they also go through a series of tests or challenges as they learn how to navigate this new world. In terms of basic story structure, I believe that this would be the rising action. In the terms of Save the Cat, I think this would be the fun and games section. Here, Luke runs into trouble almost as soon as he enters the cantina. He meets Han and Chewie. Luke and Obi-Wan have to convince them to take them to Alderaan, and Obi-Wan begins to train Luke. This is just an action-packed section of the story, and the hero doesn't have to pass every test. Failure is also an option and a way to learn. Plus, who doesn't root for an underdog? 7. Approach to the inmost cave. This is the part of the story where the hero reaches the edge of a dangerous place where the object of their quest is hidden. This inmost cave is often the headquarters of the hero's greatest enemy, and also the most dangerous place in the special world. In Star Wars, this takes the form of the Death Star. The approach part of this section is where we see our intrepid heroes making plans and preparations for entering this dangerous place and facing death, or at the very least, extreme danger. Now, if you look up different sources, there are some different opinions on which parts of Star Wars fit this part of the hero's journey. As I've already stated, I believe that the Death Star represents the inmost cave, and the approach begins when the Millennium Falcon is caught in its tractor beam, and our heroes have to make a quick plan for their upcoming ordeal. 8. The ordeal. This is the lowest part of the story for our hero. They have now reached this dark and dangerous place where they are now forced to face their fears, risking death to achieve their goals. And sometimes the hero will even give the appearance of having died. This is their ultimate test, bringing them into direct confrontation with a hostile force. Simultaneously, this is also one of the highest points of tension in the story. The reader or viewer has been watching the hero endure every step of this journey, and this is a journey designed to make us identify with the hero. Personally, I think superhero movies are a great example of this. If the hero easily wins every battle they face, why should we care? Some of the most powerful moments in a story, in my opinion, are those moments where the hero finds themselves on the brink of defeat before they rally and then save the day. One of the best parts of Disney's Hercules is that moment where he's right on the brink of failing in his quest to retrieve Meg's spirit from the underworld. But then, at the last moment, he grabs her hand and pulls her out and saves the day. In The Nightmare Before Christmas, it's that moment where Jack is wallowing in his self-pity right after being blown out of the sky on Christmas Eve, before he rallies and goes on to save the Christmas that he almost ruined. It's that stand up and cheer moment that it gives the audience a rush. In Star Wars, I view the ordeal as pretty much the entire encounter on the Death Star. Obi-Wan leaves Luke and Han so that he can shut off the tractor beam, enabling their escape. They also realize that Princess Leia is being held captive on the Death Star, and this is where the true ordeal begins. Luke and Han venture into the Death Star, aka the INMOST cave, to rescue her. They are somewhat successful in this endeavor, but they have a very close brush with death in the trash compactor. Having successfully navigated and survived this ordeal, they return to the Millennium Falcon to discover that Obi-Wan was successful in shutting off the tractor beam, but he is now locked in a fatal confrontation with Darth Vader. 9. Reward or seizing the sword. Now that our hero has faced down their ordeal and survived, they are able to take possession of the object of their quest, whether that's a magic ring, a special sword, or even some kind of significant or special knowledge. This moment shows us that the hero is no longer a part of the ordinary world. In some cases, this moment might also be where the hero reconciles with a parental figure, or they are finally able to be with the person that they love. In A New Hope, Luke has had the reward all along, the Death Star plans that are hidden with R2. But now he has the additional reward of having rescued Princess Leia. Act 3. Return. Now we come to the final act of our story. We only have 3 points left in the structure, and this typically makes up about the last quarter of the story. Our heroes aren't out of the woods yet, as now they have to deal with the consequences of their ordeal. The 3 parts of Act 3 are the road back, resurrection, and the return with the elixir. So let's finish up the breakdown of each point, and then I want to share some final thoughts with you. 10. The road back. This is the part of the journey where the hero must return to their ordinary world. They cannot stay forever in the special world, as now they must take whatever treasure they have received back to their normal world. There are sometimes some really epic chase scenes here, especially if the hero hasn't reconciled with whatever antagonistic forces are at play. They must deal with the aftermath of their ordeal as they are pursued by whatever vengeful forces they may have stirred up when they seized their reward. In Star Wars, this can be seen as Darth Vader pursues Luke, Han, and Leia, eventually tracking them back to the Rebel base. 11. Resurrection. So this is where the metaphorical stuff is the most heavy. So let me read you what Chris Vogler wrote in his book, The Writer's Journey. In ancient times, hunters and warriors had to be purified before they returned to their communities, because they had blood on their hands. The hero who has been to the realm of the dead must be reborn and cleansed in one last ordeal of death and resurrection before returning to the ordinary world of the living. So, what this actually means is that the hero has one last important lesson to learn before they can return to their ordinary world as a new person. To paraphrase Vogler, this is like a final exam where the hero must prove that they have truly learned the lesson of the ordeal. This final test transforms the hero and allows them to return to the ordinary world with new knowledge and insight. In A New Hope, the resurrection moment is the final battle with the Death Star. Luke proves that he has finally learned to trust in the Force as he destroys the Death Star. 12. Return with the elixir. In this final stage of the journey, the hero returns to the ordinary world with an elixir, some kind of treasure or lesson to share with the people. There are many options for what this elixir could be, but in many stories, it's some kind of an object with the power to heal, even if that's only in the metaphorical sense. It might be an object like the Grail, with the literal power to heal, or it could be some kind of special knowledge that benefits the world, even if that's at a later date. It could be just about anything. Treasure, love, knowledge, or just a good story. But the hero must return with something, or else they will be doomed to repeat the adventure again and again until the lesson is learned and the treasure received. In Star Wars, Luke and Han return to the Rebel base to a hero's welcome. They are awarded medals in a grand ceremony as the people celebrate their temporary freedom. I have seen it stated that the elixir in this case is the temporary restoration of peace to the galaxy, but I disagree. And I think that saying that misses the point of Luke's journey entirely. What Luke brings back from his ordeal is hope. He restores hope to a once fading rebellion and inspires them to continue their fight. Okay, so I know that's a lot of information. So I'm going to share with you Chris Vogler's recap of the hero's journey because I cannot sum it up any better than he does. Heroes are introduced in the ordinary world, where they receive a call to adventure. They are reluctant at first or refuse the call, but are encouraged by a mentor to cross the first threshold and enter the special world, where they encounter tests, allies, and enemies. They approach the INMOST cave, crossing a second threshold, where they endure the ordeal. They take possession of their reward and are pursued on the road back to the ordinary world. They cross the third threshold, experience a resurrection, and are transformed by the experience. They return with the elixir, a boon or treasure to benefit the ordinary world. And that's the basic structure of the hero's journey. And Vogler covered all of this in just 15 pages of his 300-page book. So obviously this is just barely skimming the surface of all that the hero's journey has to offer. So I may cover more of this in a later video. So as I said earlier, this is actually an incredibly flexible structure. Vogler himself says that the structure shouldn't be followed too closely or draw attention to itself. In fact, you can add or delete any of these points, or even shuffle them around into whatever order fits your story best. And that is the true beauty of this structure. What's important in the hero's journey are not these individual points on a checklist. It's about the values, the real-life experiences that these symbols represent. That's what makes it so prevalent in storytelling. Writers pull in these elements without conscious thought because they are symbols of our life experiences. It's also what makes it so difficult sometimes to discuss different stories through the lens of the hero's journey, because symbols are incredibly subjective. Star Wars is such a great example because George Lucas was so intentional about using the monomyth to form his story structure. But other writers may not be pulling these elements in intentionally. And you may have noticed that even with Star Wars, there is not a unanimous agreement about which parts of the story line up with which elements of the hero's journey. In a lot of ways, it's all up to the audience, because the only person who truly knows which part is which is the author. Okay, obviously I have fallen completely in love with this story structure. I think it is absolutely amazing, and I fully intend to keep studying it. If you want to learn more as well, I have 3 recommendations for you. Obviously, the quintessential books on the hero's journey are The Writer's Journey by Chris Vogler and The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell. But I have also discovered a fantastic podcast. It's called The Hero's Journey, and it only updates once a month, but the hosts Jeff Garvin and Dan Zarzana do a fantastic job of discussing popular and well-known books and movies through the lens of the hero's journey. I highly recommend it if you are interested in getting a more in-depth look at this structure. As always, links will be in the description below. Okay, so that is all I have for you today. But I'm really curious to know whether or not you agree with me about my interpretation of the hero's journey as it applies to Star Wars. So make sure you let me know in the comments down below. Or, as always, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. And if you want to see more, then don't forget to subscribe. I post new videos on Wednesdays. See you next time. Hey everyone! Chewie, stop sniffing so loud. Hey everyone, I'm T. The hero's journey is a pretty heavy structure. And many students of Campbell's work. Crap. Later. I lost it. Anyway, Campbell called this. Anyway, Campbell called. Wow. Okay. Get it together. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Even though the sound is good, it's something atrocious. Chewie, stop it! Anyway, Campbell called this I think it's also worth I'm going to present the structure as Vogler laid it out because this is a very flexible This is a pretty The first act of the hero's journey is where we see our hero While this act contains the most points of the structure, it's While this act contains most of the While this act has I can do this. While this act contains the most structural points of the hero's journey, the 5 points of the hero 9 reward or it could be anything. Treasure, knowledge, blah. Okay.